I've owned and lived in the same house for 8 years. It's a normal family-sized house, which was relevant when I had roommates. But when they moved out and I was the only one living here, I had nothing to do with the extra space. It's technically a 4-bedroom house, but I only use 2 of the bedrooms. One is my main bedroom, and the other is the gaming room. The other 2 rooms are at the far end of the upstairs hallway. One has a few storage boxes in it, and the other is completely empty. After getting off work at 9 p.m., I picked up Wendy's on the way home and went straight to the game room. I was off tomorrow, so I thought it would be fun to game all night. I put on my headphones and loaded up Call of Duty, but before I could even load into a match, I thought I heard something that sounded like a knock at the front door. I took off my headphones and listened, but I didn't hear anything. I figured they would have knocked again if someone was there, so I went back to my game. Probably about 2 hours went by, and then I heard it again. It sounded like either a knock or a door closing, or something like that. But with my headphones on and my room door closed, it was too quiet for me to tell. I got up and opened the door, looking out into the hallway and waiting for the sound to come again. After a minute, though, I went downstairs and looked out the front door. Nobody was outside my house, and everything seemed normal. Having heard these sounds, I made sure the door was locked before going back upstairs. I left my room door open this time, so if it happened again, I might hear it better. I put my headphones back on and continued gaming. I played through a whole round, so about 20 minutes. As the game ended and I leaned back in my chair, a figure rushed past the open doorway, just off to the side of my view. I immediately threw off my headphones and jumped from my chair, horrified and unsure what to do. I just stared at the doorway, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't get the courage to move for several minutes. The adrenaline was coursing through my veins, and my mind was racing. I was trying to make sense of what I had just seen, but it didn't make any sense. There was no way anyone could have been in the house without me knowing. I had checked the doors and windows before going upstairs, and I was sure they were locked. When I finally looked into the hallway, though, nobody was there. But the front door was unlocked again. I couldn't believe it. Someone had been in the house and had left through the front door. But how? I had heard no other sounds, no creaking floorboards, no footsteps. I went downstairs and checked the front door. It was a solid wooden door with a deadbolt. I tried to figure out how someone could have opened it without making any noise. I examined the door frame, but there were no signs of forced entry. I was starting to feel a sense of dread. Someone had been in my house, and I had no idea who it was or what they wanted. I was alone, vulnerable, and terrified. I grabbed my phone and called the police. When the police arrived, they took a report and investigated the house. They found no signs of forced entry or theft, and they didn't see anyone pass by. They concluded that the intruder, if anybody was even there, must have had a key or had known a way to bypass the security system. The police officer asked me if I had any enemies or if I had recently had any disagreements with anyone. Or maybe known of anybody that had been deceased. I couldn't think of anyone. I was a peaceful person who didn't have any enemies. The officer told me that it was possible that the intruder was just a random stranger who had broken into the house for a quick thrill. Or just wanted to watch me. He advised me to be more cautious in the future and to make sure my doors and windows were always locked. Because they might return. It happens often. I thanked the officer for his help and watched him leave. As he drove away, I stood there in the driveway, feeling a sense of relief. I was safe, for now. But the experience had left me shaken and unsettled. I went back inside and locked the door behind me. I checked all the windows and made sure they were securely fastened. Then, I went upstairs and locked my bedroom door. I tried to relax, but my mind was racing. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. I was terrified that the intruder might return. I spent the rest of the night tossing and turning, unable to sleep. The next morning, I went to the hardware store and bought a new deadbolt for the front door. I also bought a security system and had it installed. I was determined to make my home as safe as possible. I didn't want to live in fear.
My wife and I take annual vacations to different places. It's our way of taking a break from everyday life and spending quality time together. This year, we booked a cabin in Washington State. It was remote and described online as quiet and peaceful, far from other people. Most of our lives are spent in crowded cities, so this sounded great. We flew in and walked to a grocery store to pick up supplies. Then, we took a taxi to the cabin. We didn't have a car because we knew we'd only be there for 3 days. We wanted to spend most of our time at the cabin and order an Uber if we needed anything else. The taxi ride was over an hour from the town we landed in. Most of the drive was through huge mountain ranges and tree-covered landscapes. It was beautiful and got us excited for our stay. Around 7 p.m., we arrived at the cabin. It was completely alone in the middle of the forest. Even the driveway was just tire tracks in the dirt. We got out, paid the taxi, and brought our stuff inside. The cabin itself was small. There was the main floor with the kitchen and living room, and a ladder leading up to a loft area with the bed. The bed area was short, so you had to crawl into it like in a tiny home. We unpacked the groceries and made a quick dinner because we were tired from the flight. Then, we opened a bottle of wine and settled in for the night. We lit up the fireplace and talked about how we were looking forward to the next few days. It was around 11 p.m., and as we talked, we both suddenly heard a sound outside. It was a faint rustling sound, like something was moving in the grass near the cabin. We both froze, our hearts pounding in our chests. I glanced at my wife, and I could see the fear in her eyes. I tried to put on a brave face and told her it was probably just an animal. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The sound was too deliberate, too human. It was coming from the direction of the woods behind the cabin. I got up and walked over to the window, peering out into the darkness. The only thing I could see were the silhouettes of the trees, their branches swaying gently in the night breeze. I strained my ears, trying to hear the sound again, but it had stopped. Just as I was about to turn away, I heard it again. This time, it was louder and clearer. It sounded like someone was walking slowly through the undergrowth. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it out the window. I scanned the area, but there was nothing there. My wife was now visibly scared, her hands trembling. I tried to calm her down, but I was just as afraid as she was. I told her to stay put while I went to investigate. I grabbed a baseball bat from the corner of the room and crept quietly towards the front door. I opened the door cautiously and stepped out onto the porch. The night air was cold and damp, and the only sound was the distant hoot of an owl. I turned on the outdoor lights and looked around. The driveway was empty, but I could still hear the rustling sound coming from the woods. I took a deep breath and stepped off the porch. I walked slowly towards the edge of the clearing, my heart pounding in my chest. As I got closer to the trees, the rustling sound became louder and louder. I raised the baseball bat and prepared to defend myself. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness. It was a tall, shadowy figure that seemed to be moving towards me with a menacing purpose. I swung the baseball bat, but it missed. The figure lunged at me, knocking me to the ground. I struggled to get up, but the figure was on top of me, pinning me down with an iron grip. I could feel its cold breath on my face, and a wave of fear washed over me. I closed my eyes and waited for the end. Just then, I heard a noise from behind the figure. It was the sound of a car engine starting. I opened my eyes and saw headlights approaching from the driveway. The figure seemed to sense the approaching danger. It released me and jumped off of me, disappearing back into the woods. I scrambled to my feet and ran towards the driveway. The car pulled up, and a police officer got out. I explained what had happened, and the officer assured me that they would investigate the matter. As the police car drove away, I stood there in the driveway, shaking. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I had been attacked by someone in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere. I walked back to the cabin and went inside. My wife was waiting for me, her face pale with fear. I told her what had happened, and she hugged me tightly. We both knew that we were lucky to have survived. We spent the rest of the night huddled together, too scared to sleep. The next morning, we packed up our things and left the cabin. We never returned.